If you're listening to this, don't come to Raven's Hollow. The company is lying. This place wasn't abandoned. It was just moved somewhere else. They're opening the door, but they're not using their hands. Gad, they heard the signal.
When he entered the town, the first thing he noticed was not the silence. Before the silence, there was something more disturbing: absence. As if something had been taken from the town, and the emptiness it left behind had never been filled. Raven's Hollow was an old mining town buried deep in the Appalachian Mountains of western West Virginia, still marked on maps, but forgotten by roads. According to official records, the town was completely abandoned within a few weeks, after the mine was shut down in November 1986 for safety reasons. Once alive with coal dust, workers' voices, and shift whistles, the place now carried only its own emptiness. What was missing from Raven's Hollow now was life. There were no birds, no insects, no wind. Even the trees were motionless, as if nature itself had chosen to distance itself from this town. When Elias Moore crossed the town limits, the static on his car radio abruptly stopped. The endless noise of the modern world gave way to an absolute emptiness, echoing inside the human skull. Elias was a fiber infrastructure technician. His job was to connect the world. But here, he did not yet know that there would be no souls left to connect. Elias was a lonely man, and this loneliness was still new. An unhappy marriage had dragged his already disappointing life even further down. All he wanted was a little peace, but that too had been denied. The divorce papers were still in the glove compartment. His hand hadn't trembled when he signed them, but afterward he couldn't make sense of the strange void he had fallen into. This job, this town, was, if only for a few days, a chance to escape his own life. Elias Moore slowed the car. The houses lining both sides of the road were abandoned, but not in a way that suggested a hurried escape. The roofs were intact, neither collapsed nor repaired. Their faded facades looked as if they had been stuck in the same season for years. Behind some windows, lace curtains from the 1980s still hung in place. Rusty shoe racks cast shadows on the doorsteps, and the thresholds carried the feeling of a return that had been left unfinished. The gardens had not been overtaken by weeds. Instead, they looked as if they had been tended one last time, and then forgotten. There was only unfinished time here. Life had chosen to stop at a certain point, and had never continued. The GPS lost signal. The screen went dark. Elias cursed, but his voice echoed strangely inside the car, longer than normal. He had trouble recognizing it, as if his voice had passed through somewhere else before returning. He turned off the engine. He entered the first house. He opened the door slowly. Cold air hit his face, but not the cold from outside. This was the cold of a room that had not been warmed by human breath in a long time. A table was set in the living room, The plates were in place. There was a bowl of soup. There was no steam rising from it, but it looked freshly served. Why is everything so in order? He thought. He touched the soup on the table. The plate was ice cold, but the soup was glossy, as if it had just been poured. That was when the first crack formed in his mind. If no one was here who had set the table, if everyone had left, why had no one locked their doors? Ilias's fingers trembled. A thin shiver began creeping into his soul. He whispered to himself, "Just do your job and leave. Just do your job." His heart was racing. Logic was trying to step in. Maybe someone had just stepped out, he thought. Maybe. That was when he noticed the bread. There was a clear bite mark at the end of it. Not torn, not broken, bitten. Elias reached out. The moment his fingers touched it, he pulled back. Because the bread wasn't soft. It wasn't hard either. It was elastic. Like skin, human skin. His stomach clenched. For a moment, he thought he was going to vomit, but he didn't. Instead, he denied it. The human mind chooses denial before fear, because denial is the fastest form of escape. "You're tired," he told himself. Just hearing his own voice gave him a strange sense of safety. "You're imagining things." He moved into the back room. The bed was unmade. A strand of hair lay on the pillow. Closet doors were open. Shoes were neatly lined up by the door. But everything was covered with a thin layer of dust. These people hadn't run away. It was as if they had simply shifted elsewhere. He took out his phone and opened the recording app. "Raven's Hollow," he said. "Day 1. He stopped the recording and listened. He heard his own voice. But behind it, faint, irregular, almost imperceptible, there was another breath. Elias took off his headphones, listened to the room. No one was there, but on the recording, someone else was breathing. He entered several more abandoned houses after that. He saw the same scenes again and again. Each one deepened his fear and confusion. That night, he decided to sleep in his truck. The idea of sleeping inside any house was terrifying enough. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him. He didn't know when he fell asleep, but he woke up at 1:43. Not to a sound. To a rhythm, a deep, slow, regular vibration. Not a machine. It was like a heavy, steady breath rising from beneath the ground. Elias looked through the window toward the source. The mine. The entrance was dark, but it felt as if something inside was moving. Then the doors opened. There was no creak, there was synchronization. Elias stood frozen, staring at the mouth of the mine. Unnatural, terrifying human silhouettes began emerging in a precise order. They weren't walking, they seemed to be separating from the ground, as if the earth could no longer hold what was inside it. These human-like figures moved toward the town. They weren't in a hurry, but they didn't hesitate either. Elias was on the verge of losing his mind. He stood there, petrified. Starting the engine and escaping crossed his mind. But what if they heard the sound, multiplied, and attacked? For now, staying silent seemed safest. The figures dispersed into the abandoned houses, as if each of them knew exactly where their home was. Torn between fear and curiosity, Elias gathered the courage to step out of the truck and watch them from what he considered a safe distance. A woman sat at the table, picked up a spoon, raised it toward her mouth, but her mouth didn't open. The motion stopped halfway. A man pulled out a chair, sat down, and stared at the empty space across from him. Another man held a newspaper, pretending to read it. These weren't conscious actions. They were repetitive, mechanical movements. Elias held his breath. Then the woman at the table turned her head. There were no eyes, but its face was turned directly toward the window Elias was hiding behind. That was the worst part. His foot brushed against an empty bottle. It didn't fall over, but it emitted a faint hum. Not glass, electric vibration. They all stood up at the same time. They didn't run, they didn't scream, they listened. Power poles began to hum. Fiber cables trembled slightly. Elias understood. They weren't hearing sound, they were hearing signal. He took out his phone and turned on night vision. The walls of the houses were no longer walls. Thousands of black fiber cables spilled from within, like a nervous system. The cables pulsed, as if breathing. A child whispered, not a word, but Elias heard his own name. That's when he ran. As Elias ran, he couldn't hear his footsteps. The absence of sound terrified him even more. His feet hit the ground, but it was as if the earth absorbed the impact. He moved behind a house and dropped to his knees. His chest burned. He tried to breathe, but his lungs wouldn't fill, because the air he was inhaling wasn't there. The town fell silent again. Instantly, the hum of the power lines stopped. Doors closed. The people vanished. When Elias lifted his head, the streets were empty, as if everything he had just seen had been set aside in some fold of his mind, waiting to be forgotten. But forgetting was impossible, because beneath the table, the mark left by the spoon was still there. Elias didn't sleep until morning. He sat locked inside the truck. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the cables inside the walls pulsing like breath. The more he thought about them, the more his heart began to match their rhythm. That similarity made him sick. At sunrise, Raven's Hollow was abandoned again. By day, it was an ordinary ghost town. No movement, no traces, no sound. By night, perhaps it was truly haunted. When Elias realized this, what filled him wasn't relief, but terror. Because what he saw at night was denied by daylight. That denial isolated him. He thought for a moment, then called the company.
There are people here,
he said. His voice was uncontrolled.
but only at night. I don't think I'm well. It hurts my pride to say this, but I'm scared.
There was a brief silence on the other end. Keyboard sounds, then a cold voice spoke.
Satellite images show Raven's Hollow, completely empty.
The man said.
Elias, you're alone in the area.
No, Ilias said.
I'm not alone.
Ilias, the voice replied.
You're exhausted. Finish the job and leave the area.
The line went dead. Elias stared at the phone. The screen went dark. For a moment, he saw his reflection in the glass. His face was pale, dark circles under his eyes. For an instant, he thought there was no depth in his eyes. He put the phone in his pocket. He decided to run. He got into the truck, turned the ignition. Nothing. He tried again. The engine didn't turn. He opened the hood. The cables that should have been there were gone. In their place were black roots rising from the ground, shining like fiber. They extended into the engine. He had never felt fear or helplessness like this before. His truck was now part of the town. His mind tried to figure out what to do, but it wasn't working. His thoughts wouldn't come together. His hand began to itch. He ignored it at first. Then the itching spread. He opened his palm. Beneath his skin, a thin line was moving. He scratched violently. The line twisted, fled. It was a cable. Under his skin, Elias screamed, but no sound came out, as if his throat had forgotten how to turn signal into sound. When all paths closed, he thought, fear won't change fate. There was only one place left, the mine. The fiber line ran through it. The breathing sound at night came from there. Whether he wanted to or not, Elias knew. The truth was there. After minutes of forcing himself forward, he gathered his courage and entered the mine. The air changed immediately. It was humid, but not with water. Handprints covered the walls, but the fingers were too long. The joints were wrong. This wasn't a human hand, but it wanted to be. The deeper he went, the clearer the breathing became, and the whispers began. Not words, not sentences. A woman's laughter, a child's name, the sound of a house door opening. The miners weren't dead. They had been uploaded. Their minds, their memory patterns, habits, voices, reactions had not been erased. They had been transferred from a body to another carrier. The mine was a biological server. The organism beneath the ground had absorbed human memories, behaviors, lives for years. But it wasn't enough, because memory alone was useless. It needed meaning. It needed humans. Elias tried to turn back, but when he did, the entrance was gone. This time, though he couldn't hear his steps, he could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The wall was sealed. The cables vibrated, and one whisper became clear. This time, a single voice. Connect. Elias stepped back, slipped, fell. When he placed his hands on the ground, he realized the surface was warm, alive. A shadow passed over him. When he looked up, he saw the beings from the town. They surrounded him. They didn't attack. They didn't approach. They only spoke, They used his mother's voice, his ex-wife's, his own inner voice. They knew him. Because he was already in the system, the cable beneath his skin was proof. Elias dropped to his knees. He understood they wouldn't kill him. They were going to do something worse. They were going to complete him. Elias remained on his knees. His legs were still his, but they no longer obeyed. His muscles were locked. He couldn't tell whether it was panic or something else. The circle wasn't closing. The beings weren't approaching. There was distance between them, not a threat, but a weight. They weren't rushing him. They knew he couldn't escape. And that was worse than death. When the whispers stopped, silence returned. But this wasn't the silence of the first day. This was arrested silence, as if the town was taking a breath before finishing its work. Elias looked at his hands. The cable beneath his skin was no longer hiding. A thin black line ran from his wrist to his elbow, moving with his pulse. Each time his heart beat, the cable pulsed with it. That harmony frightened him more than nausea ever could. He tried to stand. He succeeded. The beings seemed pleased. None of them moved. They only turned their heads simultaneously toward the deeper parts of the mine. It wasn't an invitation. It was a direction. Elias walked. The mine no longer felt narrow. The walls had widened, or he had shrunk. Time perception had broken. He looked at his watch. The screen was on, but there were no numbers. Measuring time had become unnecessary. When he reached the control center, he saw the lights. Real lights, metal, screens. The hum of cooling fans. His knees trembled. Hope arrived faster than fear. This is real, he thought. This is real. He threw himself at the panel, pressed keys. His fingers shook, but the system was active. The fiber line was alive. Data was flowing. "Cut it," he whispered. "Just cut it." But when he looked at the screen, he saw the connection wasn't one way. This wasn't an upload. This was a synchronization. An image appeared, a bedroom, familiar. Too familiar. His bedroom. Elias approached, gasping. The man on the screen was sleeping, face turned to the pillow. The rise and fall of his shoulder showed he was breathing. Elias raised his hand. The man on the screen did the same, but with a 1-second delay. Elias stepped back. He tried to remember. His arrival in Raven's Hollow, the road, the town. But the edges of those memories were soft, blurred, as if they had been added later. The real memory was somewhere else. Everything played before his eyes like a film reel. 1 week earlier, the technician who came to his house, the fiber box. The first connection, the headache, then darkness. Elias dropped to his knees. The town, the mine, the beings. They weren't locations. They were an interface. The organism beneath the ground reached the human mind through cables, but it couldn't do it directly. Human consciousness wasn't compatible with raw data. So it created a town, a story, a context. Raven's Hollow wasn't a place. It was a loading screen. The beings entered the control center. This time, they moved differently. More fluid, more certain. Elias realized. As he connected, they were being completed too. One of them stepped forward. Its face was still blind, but now more familiar. Elias recognized his own features. "It's not over," Elias said. He was surprised to hear his voice. "I can cut the connection." The being tilted its head slightly. It wasn't a rejection. It was a correction. "The connection," said a single voice, coming from all of them at once, "was established long ago." The progress bar filled the screen. 100%. Upload complete. Elias's head spun. His vision went dark. When he opened his eyes, he was in his bed. It was daytime. Light filtered through the window. The curtains moved gently. Birdsong from the nearby park. City noise accompanying it. The world was as it should be. Elias laughed. A short laugh escaped him. Nervous. Relieved. He stood up, washed his hands and face. A smell came from the kitchen. Soup. He sat at the table. A bowl of soup was there. No steam, but it was warm. He picked up the spoon, then stopped. The face reflected on its surface was 1 second late. Elias moved his head. The reflection lagged again. He slowly looked into the soup. His face was there, but there were no eyes. A thin black fiber cable rose from the soup. Silently, gently. Elias didn't run, because now he knew what it was. This wasn't an attack. This was synchronization. The connection cannot be severed, because you are the cable now. Some stories are not told. They are simply uploaded. And if you have reached the end of this video, you are no longer the one listening. You are Elias. Connection established. Welcome to Raven's Hollow.